Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we strip away the denominational noise, we tackle the most complex topics in the source material, and we really try to extract the crucial, actionable insights for you, the learner.
We're all about moving beyond assumptions and getting straight into the foundational texts.
And today, wow, we are diving deep into a subject that fundamentally dictates how billions of people read and, well, understand their relationship with the divine.
It really does. We're talking about the relationship between the foundational covenant given at Mount Sinai, the Torah, and the renewed covenant brought by the Messiah in Nuya.
That's it. Our mission today is to resolve one of the most persistent, one of the most defining questions in religious studies. Did the arrival of the Messiah replace the ancient covenant and the Torah, making them, obsolete?
Or did it merely renew and profoundly transform them?
And for you, the listener, understanding this answer changes everything. I mean, it dictates your view of obedience, the nature of righteousness, and the very foundation of faith.
Absolutely. We recognize that tradition and centuries of differing interpretations have really clouded this issue.
For sure.
So our approach today is to set those traditions aside. We're going straight into the source material, the scriptural evidence. We're going to analyze the language of the prophets, the definitive words of Imnuya, and even the most challenging passages from the Apostle Paul.
All through one single lens, right?
One lens.
Yeah.
The story of a continuous covenant renewal.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start exactly where the prophetic promise originates, because I think the confusion often begins with a single, simple English word that carries a lot of baggage.
And that word is new.
Right. The new in New Covenant.
Exactly. The general assumption when someone hears new covenant is that they mean a complete unprecedented replacement.
You hear new law, you expect it to be wholly different from the old law.
That's the framework. And it's a linguistic framework rooted in modern English usage, which is what we have to challenge right away.
It really is a modern context that defines it.
Huh.
If I tell you I have a new operating system on my computer, you assume the old one is gone, it's incompatible. I've had to replace every piece of software.
And that's the exact framework many have wrongly applied to the covenant.
The idea that the Mosaic model is broken, so we just get a completely different new replacement model?
But that framework, it fundamentally misses the prophetic intention. Our starting point, and really the foundation for this entire discussion, has to be Jeremiah 31, verse 31.
Where the promise is first articulated.
Yes. We see the phrase new covenant in English, but the original Hebrew phrase is beredasha.
Okay, so the word for covenant, beritas, that's pretty established. It refers to a contractual relationship, a solemn promise.
Right.
But the word for new, badash, that's where the deep dive is absolutely essential.
Precisely. We need to explore the semantic range of thodash to understand what's really being said here. While one usage of thodash can mean brand new in the sense of creation, like something that did not exist before, that's not its primary or most frequent application.
Especially not in this kind of context.
Especially not in the context of restoration theology.
So if it doesn't mean brand new replacement, what does the word most often imply in the scriptures when it's applied to something that, already exists?
Well, the sources confirm that thodash in this prophetic and theological context strongly leans toward meaning something like renewed, restored, repaired, or refreshed.
So it's about the condition of the thing.
Exactly. It speaks to the condition, the vitality, or the quality of something established, not its wholesale replacement.
Can you give us a concrete example from the text, something where the dash is clearly used to mean restoration, not, creation from scratch? That would really help lock this in for the listener.
Absolutely. A perfect one is the story of Elijah on Mount Carmel. That's in 1 Kings 18. When he was preparing to call down fire, the text says that he repaired the altar of Yah that was broken down.
And the word for repaired is?
It's a form of vadash. He didn't build a brand new altar on a different spot with all new materials. He took the existing, ruined, scattered stones of the original altar, and he restored them. He put them back into their intended function and structure.
So the altar was made thadash, renewed, but it wasn't replaced.
That's it.
That analogy is perfect. It suggests a continuity of material and purpose. The foundation is still there. The original components are still valued.
But the damage or decay that rendered it non-functional is removed, and its former glory is restored.
So when Jeremiah uses beredasha,
he's speaking the language of restoration. He is not announcing the cancellation of the existing relationship framework that was established with Israel.
No, he's prophesying a fundamental transformation in its state, its effectiveness, and its internal capacity to function.
That's a great way to put it.
So even before we touch the Gospels or Paul, The linguistic evidence from Jeremiah himself is setting a really clear parameter for our understanding.
It is. The prophet is suggesting an overhaul, an upgrade, a deep restoration, not a demolition and reconstruction.
The initial takeaway then is just foundational. Even the language of the prophecy suggests a renewed covenant.
The relationship itself, it remains intact. It's still the covenant established at Sinai, but the depth, the intimacy, and the method of application are fundamentally transformed.
It's an operating system upgrade that integrates the core structure more deeply into the user, rather than switching to a whole new software company.
Exactly. And this realization, even just based on that one Hebrew word, it changes the entire complexion of the debate.
It really shifts the burden of proof, doesn't it? It moves it from those arguing for continuity to those who have to argue for a complete replacement.
And once we settle on renewal, we have to let the prophet himself define what that renewal actually entails.
We have to look closely at Jeremiah 31, from verse 31 through 34.
Because these verses, they provide the blueprint for the Messiah's mission.
Okay, so Jeremiah starts by establishing the problem. The reason a renewal is even necessary. He says this renewed covenant will be not like the covenant that I made with their fathers, my covenant which they broke.
And this is just a critical piece of forensic evidence.
How so?
The text explicitly attributes the failure to the people. It does not say the covenant was flawed or the law was unenforceable. It says, my covenant, which they broke.
So the problem wasn't the law's inherent righteousness, which Paul later affirms is holy and good.
Right. The problem was the people's fallen, external, and disobedient nature. The human side of the contract failed.
So the condition that needs changing is the human heart, not the divine standard. The covenant's foundation is sound, but its adherence was, well, it was external and therefore fragile.
Precisely. And Jeremiah then outlines three massive transformation points. The three ways the divine plans to solve the problem of human failure without sacrificing the covenant's integrity.
And these points define the content of the renewal.
They do. The first and most defining transformation is a shift in location. It's a move from a physical monument to the spiritual core.
I will put my Torah within them, and I will write it on their hearts.
The implications of this are almost impossible to overstate. When the Torah was external, written on stone tablets, on scrolls, like it was at Sinai, it functioned primarily as an external standard.
A perfect reflection of righteousness, sure, but it stood outside the person.
Constantly highlighting their failure. It acted like a mirror revealing dirt, but it wasn't the mechanism to wash it away.
And the practical consequence of that external law was that obedience was often driven by fear of external penalty or, social expectation.
Which can lead to hypocrisy or just superficial adherence.
A sort of checking the box mentality.
Yes. The renewed promise is that the law, the instruction, is meant to become an internal principle. It gets integrated into the core operating system of your being.
It's the difference between having a detailed map that you look at sometimes and having the entire geographical knowledge just ingrained in your intuition.
That's a fantastic analogy. Obedience shifts from an obligation based on an external text to a spontaneous desire rooted in internal character.
That sounds terrifyingly difficult to live up to. If the standard moves from don't commit the act to don't even harbor the thought, the requirement for righteousness is amplified, not lessened.
It is. But the renewal provides the mechanism for that difficulty. And that's the second key transformation point. It addresses the depth of the relationship that enables this internalization.
Which is?
No more shall every man teach his neighbor, saying, Know Yah, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them.
In the original covenant, knowledge was highly mediated. You had the priests, the Levites, the prophets.
The authorized teachers. They were the representatives who stood between the average Israelite and a full realization of the divine.
So the renewal promises a direct connection.
A fundamental, direct, and unmediated connection. Everyone will know me. And this isn't just basic familiarity. This is intimate, personal, transformative knowledge of the divine will.
It removes the need for perpetual foundational teaching.
Because the core knowledge, what is right, what is desired, the very character of the divine, is inherent. It's integrated into that personal relationship. This depth of connection is what drives internal obedience.
And then there's the third point, the one that makes the other two possible.
The sealing promise of forgiveness. Jeremiah 31:34 concludes, For I will forgive their iniquity, and their sin I will remember no more.
This is the mechanism that facilitates the internal covenant.
It has to be. The reason the external covenant was broken was sin, You can't just write the law on a dirty, marred slate.
So to implement an internal covenant, you first have to deal with the root cause of the failures.
Forgiveness is the act of cleansing that slate, of rewiring the core disposition, and allowing genuine, heart-based obedience to finally become achievable.
So we have the location changed from stone to heart, the accessibility changed from mediated to direct knowledge, and the foundation changed from sin-stained to forgiven.
Exactly. And when we look at what Jeremiah doesn't say, the picture of renewal becomes even clearer. The source material is very adamant on this point.
Okay, what doesn't he say?
First, he does not say that the Torah is abolished. It is still my Torah. That is the content of the renewal. You can't write nothing on the heart.
That's a great point. Second,
He does not say that the covenant people are replaced. He explicitly says he is making this renewed covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. The promise is to the historic covenant people.
and third,
He does not say new law is given. It is the existing instruction applied through a different mechanism, the heart and the power of forgiveness.
the conclusion here seems unavoidable. Jeremiah is describing an internal revolution of the very same external document.
It moves from command to relationship and from external condemnation to internal transformation, all using the identical foundation of instruction. This is restoration and fulfillment, full stop.
This continuity is fascinating, and it really forces us to view the Messiah's actions not as some revolutionary break from the past, but as the inevitable and promised fulfillment.
It does. We need to trace this covenant relationship through time to see how this single narrative flows.
Because if we accept the premise of renewal, then the historical sequence has to demonstrate that Imnuya was simply executing the final stage of a long-term contract.
Right. We can trace this story in 3 definitive blood-sealed stages. It shows continuity in the instrument, even as the method of sealing progresses.
Okay, so stage 1, the covenant cut with Moses. This is the initial establishment, the solemn contract signing.
We look to Exodus chapter 24, verses 7 and 8. Moses read the book of the covenant in the hearing of the people.
And they ratified the terms. They said, all that Yah has spoken we will do, and we will be obedient.
Then Moses took the blood, threw it on the people, and said, "Behold the blood of the covenant which Yah has made with you."
So a key point here. The Torah becomes the terms of the relationship. It's agreed upon, and it's sealed with animal blood. This establishes the binding legal nature of the relationship under the authority of Moses.
Yes. But even as this first stage was being sealed, the second stage was already being anticipated.
Stage 2, a prophet like Moses was promised.
This is the line of succession, ensuring the continuity of authority.
And this promise is right there in Deuteronomy chapter 18.
Verses 15 through 19. Moses told Israel that in the future, Yah, your mighty one, will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you. To him you shall listen.
And the prophecy is given the weight of divine law.
Absolutely. I will put my words in his mouth, and whoever will not listen to my words which he speaks in my name, I will require it of him.
Moses is essentially establishing the future Supreme Court authority. He is not setting an expiration date on the law.
Not at all. He's ensuring that when the new, greater voice arrives, that voice must be heeded. And it confirms the authority of the original source through that prophet's lips. It's a promise of fulfillment and clarified authority, not cancellation.
But wait, hang on. This introduces a natural point of skepticism for a listener.
Okay.
If the original covenant was sealed with the blood of oxen and goats, and that blood symbolized the life given for ratification, why would a renewal require a different type of blood? Wouldn't a renewal just require, a recommitment to the existing terms?
That is the pivotal question. It's the bridge that connects Jeremiah to Imnuya.
Okay.
The sources show the reason the blood has to change is because of the effectiveness of the sealing and the forgiveness required.
Yeah.
The animal blood in Exodus 24, it covered the immediate legal violation, but it couldn't provide the internal transformation and the perpetual cleansing promised in Jeremiah 31.
It couldn't write the Torah on the heart.
No. Only a perfect ultimate sacrifice could provide the forgiveness necessary to write the Torah on the heart permanently.
And that leads us directly to stage 3, the covenant sealed in blood at the Last Supper.
The moment Imnuya institutes the memorial, he connects his sacrifice directly back to both Moses and Jeremiah.
His phrasing is so precise, and the use of the definite article, the word the, is so critically important across the gospel accounts.
In Matthew 26, Mark 14, Luke 22, in every instance, he speaks of, "This is my blood of the covenant."
He doesn't say, I am establishing a new covenant document that voids the old one.
No. He claims his blood sacrifice is sealing the existing covenant, It provides the final, ultimate means of ratification and the mechanism for forgiveness that was promised in Jeremiah 31.
So it's the ultimate upgrade of the seal.
That's it. The contract remains the contract. The beret remains. But the guarantee and the power to adhere to its terms, the Torah on the heart, is now secured by his life.
It's the same promissory note, but now it's backed by infinite collateral.
A perfect way to say it.
So the synthesis is just so clear. The covenant has one continuous storyline. It was cut with Moses in Exodus 24.
Promised in succession in Deuteronomy 18.
Renewed anticipation in Jeremiah 31.
And finally, sealed by Imnuya's sacrifice at the Last Supper. One covenant, one continuous story, culminating in a transformation of how that covenant is lived out internally.
This unified timeline, it gives us the lens through which we absolutely have to interpret the teachings of Imnuya.
His authority isn't arbitrary. It isn't just dropped out of the sky. It is rooted directly in the prophetic succession model that was established by Moses.
And the moment that officially establishes him as the prophet like Moses is the transfiguration.
Yes. The divine voice speaks in Matthew 17, verse 5. It confirms Imnuya's identity, but crucially, it provides one command.
This is my beloved son, hear him.
And that phrase, hear him, is the direct and specific command given back in Deuteronomy 18.
It's the fulfillment of Moses' own prophecy.
It is. The ultimate authority that once established the law through Moses is now speaking the final, most complete interpretation through the Son. This is succession and profound affirmation, not cancellation of the former authority.
This leads us right into the heart of his public ministry, the Sermon on the Mount, which I think is often the most misunderstood section of his teaching.
It is. So many people read Matthew chapter 5, and they conclude that Imnuya is contradicting the existing law, or at least setting up a higher, new, separate law.
But he seems to know people will think that.
Oh, absolutely. The challenge is that listeners tend to separate his commands from his clear statement of intent. He had to be explicit because the concept of abolition was clearly on their minds.
And he addresses it so definitively in Matthew 5, verses 17 to 19. Do not think I came to abolish the Torah or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill.
And then he adds, whoever relaxes even the least of these commandments will be least in the kingdom.
So let's talk about that word fulfill. The Greek is plerou.
Right. And it means to complete, to make full, to bring to saturation. It means providing the true, profound internal meaning that the external keeping could never achieve.
If you fulfill a prophecy, you don't cancel it, you bring it to fruition.
Exactly. If you fulfill a requirement, you meet it entirely. He came to show the law in its fullest, deepest sense.
And that warning against relaxing the commandments is incredibly stern. It reinforces the permanence of the standard.
It does. He suggests that the least commandments remain valid, and adherence is tied directly to your status within the coming kingdom.
And this sets the stage for the practical demonstration of what we were just talking about.
Torah internalized Jeremiah 31 in action. He takes these well-known external laws and shows their internal, heart-level requirement.
Let's use the two classic examples, murder and adultery. He starts by quoting the external law. You have heard, you shall not murder, or you shall not commit adultery.
This is the external legal requirement written on stone, the baseline.
But then he applies the internal standard promised by Jeremiah.
But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment, and whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart.
This is where that standard becomes infinitely higher.
He's not creating a new command. He's demonstrating the original, underlying spiritual intent of the command when it is truly written on the heart.
So the external law prohibited the destructive act, the murder, the physical adultery.
And the internalized law prohibits the destructive root emotion, the anger, the lust that leads to the act in the first place.
Because the law's purpose was always love of God and love of neighbor.
Always. If you harbor anger, you have functionally broken the commandment, love your neighbor, even if you haven't lifted a hand. If you harbor lust, you have functionally broken the command for purity and respect, even if you haven't acted physically.
It's the difference between just obeying a rule and actually possessing the character the rule requires.
That's it. This concept is so important for you, the listener, because it changes the definition of obedience. It's not about checking off a list of external behaviors. It's about a continuous internal audit of your disposition and your motives.
Okay, so this brings us back to the continuity of authority. If the Torah remains and Imnuya is fulfilling it, how do we reconcile the fact that he gave very specific, new commandments to his disciples, like love one another as I have loved you. Are these new laws separate from the Torah?
Well, the sources show us it's one singular will, the Father's will expressed through the Son's life and teaching. And Nuya himself confirms this continuity in John 15, verse 10.
What does he say there?
He says, "If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love."
So that's the direct, unbreakable chain.
It is. The Father's foundational will, expressed through the Torah, is lived perfectly and taught purely by the Son.
So the Son's commandments, which are often just the summation of the Torah's most profound intent, are the definitive internalized expression of the Father's original instruction.
They are not separate legislation. They are the definition of the Torah written on the heart.
And John reinforces this years later in his first letter.
He does. In 1 John chapter 2, "By this we know that we know him, if we keep his commandments. Whoever says he abides in him ought to walk just as he walked."
To walk as Imnuya walked is to live the Father's Torah, internalized and transformed by the forgiveness he offered.
It's the same standard of righteousness, now just achievable through a new mechanism of nearness and internal power.
Okay, so we've established that the law itself is holy, righteous, and good. Paul says that in Romans 7.
He does. The problem was never the content of the law. It was its location, external stone, and the inability of sinful humanity to keep it.
So the renewal, therefore, it has to target the function of the law, not its essential character.
This functional shift is the central argument for renewal over replacement. The law remains, but its role in the life of the believer changes dramatically.
Let's make this contrast really, really clear for the listener.
Okay, so think of the law as two different instruments, depending on whether it's external or internal.
Before renewal.
The Torah was primarily on stone. Its function was mainly as external judgment, condemnation, and instruction. It stood outside you, revealing your sin precisely, but offering no power for internal change.
It acted as the contract that was constantly broken.
Creating dependence on mediated ritual and, well, distance from the divine.
Right. Think of it like a strict speed limit sign that gives you a ticket every time you exceed the limit. It defines right behavior externally, and it imposes a penalty when you fail.
But it doesn't make you a better driver.
No. Only a more cautious one when the police are around.
Exactly. Now, after renewal, the Torah is on the heart. Its function becomes internal guidance, sanctification, and a blueprint for living.
So it operates as an intuitive guide within the believer.
Driven by the Spirit and enabled by forgiveness. The law is no longer primarily a standard for judgment that leads to death, but a guiding map for life that leads to righteousness.
Using your analogy, the goal is not merely to avoid the ticket. The goal is to drive safely and ethically and skillfully, where the principles of safe driving become an internal habit, not just some externally enforced rule.
The heart is the new engine, and the Torah is the new operating system.
In this functional framework, this is what allows us to properly integrate the teachings of Paul.
It's the only way. When Paul discusses being free from the law, he has to be understood as being free from the law's function, as a condemning external judge, and free from the requirement of justification by external obedience.
He's not saying the instruction itself is gone.
Absolutely not. That distinction is crucial. Paul asks in Romans 3, verse 31, "Do we then nullify the law through faith?"
And he answers his own question.
May it never be. On the contrary, we establish the law.
To establish something is to confirm its validity, its permanence, its necessary role.
Faith doesn't discard the law. It makes the law's true internal purpose achievable. Only by grace through faith can you gain the internal capacity promised by Jeremiah to actually fulfill the law's requirements.
And if we need even more confirmation, Romans 8, verse 4 states the ultimate purpose of all this.
That the righteous requirement of the law is fulfilled in us, who walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit.
This is the pinnacle of the renewal. The law's demand for righteousness is finally met.
Because the law is no longer relying on flawed human effort, operating under external pressure.
Yeah.
It's now empowered internally by the Spirit, driving a character change that spontaneously adheres to the law's inherent justice and mercy.
So the law is not removed, it is profoundly relocated. It moves from a legal text used to condemn transgressions to an internal attribute of character guiding your actions.
And this relocation really informs how we handle the ancient commands. Practically speaking, what does Torah on the heart look like for you, a modern listener?
It clearly doesn't mean you have to reenact every ancient cultural form or civil regulation or temple ritual that applied specifically to the priesthood in Israel 3,000 years ago.
Of course not. We don't live in an agricultural society governed by a theocratic monarchy. The forms and the penalties, they have to change with the cultural context.
But the underlying principles, they should be permanent.
Precisely. It means living the fundamental, eternal values that those forms expressed. The source material highlights core values like justice, mercy, faithfulness, holiness, love of neighbor.
These are the weightier matters that every single law points toward.
And Imnua made this so clear when he clarified the priorities in Matthew 23. He rebukes the religious leaders for focusing on external minutiae.
He says, "You have neglected the weightier matters of the Torah, justice, mercy, and faithfulness."
He wasn't canceling the laws about tithing mint and cumin. He was clarifying the divine priority.
Right.
The renewed covenant ensures that your focus is on the character change, the justice and mercy, while simultaneously confirming the validity of the entire law structure as instruction.
So the forms change, but the foundational values of righteousness do not. The heart-level command is to embody the character of the divine, which is what the law describes. We've built a really solid case for continuity, flowing from Moses to Jeremiah to Imnuya, yet we have to address the source of the greatest confusion in the modern discussion.
The letters of Paul.
Exactly. If the first three voices are unanimous on fulfillment and continuity, why does Paul sometimes seem to speak the language of termination?
Well, the perceived contradiction only arises, as the source material identifies, when we isolate Paul from the foundational context.
The context provided by Moses, Jeremiah, and most importantly, Imnuya.
Paul is writing inspired application. He is not writing foundation.
It's like reading an intense technical memo about optimizing one specific function of a complex machine, but you haven't read the machine's primary design specification manual.
The memo only makes sense in the context of the charter.
And we actually have a clear scriptural caution about this very difficulty.
We do. Peter, a fellow foundational apostle, warned us in 2 Peter chapter 3. He acknowledges that Paul wrote letters containing some things hard to understand.
And he says that the untaught and unstable twist them to their own destruction, as they do also the rest of the scriptures.
That is a powerful indictment and a needed warning. If Peter knew Paul's writings were easy to twist, we have to approach them with a disciplined commitment to the foundation.
The rule has to be. If Paul seems to contradict the clear, repeated words of the Messiah or the prophets, we have to re-examine our interpretation of Paul.
It's the only safe way. When Paul is read alone, the Torah often appears gone. But when Paul is read through the clear framework of Jeremiah 31 internalization and Imnuya's teaching fulfillment, the Torah sounds alive in the heart.
And this forces us to re-examine key phrases that are often used to argue for abolition.
The most famous example, of course, is Romans 10, verse 4.
Messiah is the end, telos of the law. To the everyday English speaker, end means termination. If I reach the end of the road, I have to stop.
But the Greek word telos possesses a profound semantic range that goes far beyond simple termination. While it can mean termination, as in the end of a process,
It much more frequently means goal, purpose, or fulfillment.
it's the difference between the end of a marathon, where you stop running, and the end of a business plan, where you achieve the objective.
And given what Imnuya said in Matthew 5, that he came to fulfill, the definition of telos as the goal or fulfillment makes the most sense.
It's the only one that harmonizes the texts.
So if we adopt this interpretation, what is Paul actually saying in Romans 10.4?
He is stating that the Messiah is the destination the Torah was always aiming for. The purpose of the law, which was to lead humanity to righteousness and intimate knowledge of the divine will, is achieved in the Messiah.
The law did its job perfectly by revealing sin and pointing to the need for a redeemer.
And once that Redeemer arrives, the goal has been achieved. But the instruction, the roadmap itself, doesn't suddenly vanish.
Okay, this framework, where the law's goal is achieved in Messiah, is essential for addressing other difficult Pauline passages. For instance, in Galatians, Paul seems extremely harsh on those trying to return to the works of the law.
He is. He suggests they have fallen from grace.
How does the renewal model handle this?
Paul is fighting against a specific functional error, using the external performance of the law-like circumcision or ritual adherence as the means of your justification.
As the basis for your standing before the divine.
Yes. He is saying that the functional role of the law as an external judge and a path to works-based acceptance is terminated by faith.
So he's not saying circumcision is evil. He's saying that relying on the act of circumcision to make you right with the divine is futile.
Because that defeats the power of forgiveness and the whole point of the internalization of the covenant.
It's a misuse of the tool.
Exactly. The renewal teaches that justification being made right comes only through faith in Imnuia. But once you are justified, the law's function switches from external condemnation to internal guidance and sanctification.
You don't keep the law to be saved.
You keep the law because you are saved and because the law is now written on your heart. Paul's goal is to protect justification by faith, not to remove moral instruction.
What about passages like Colossians 2, where he talks about not being judged for food, drink, or specific festivals? Many take this as clear evidence that the ritual aspects of the Torah have been entirely abolished.
Well, this brings us back to function over form. Paul is often battling Gnosticism and a kind of legalism that insisted on rigorous external adherence to ritual forms.
As if those rituals, the shadow, were the means of salvation or spiritual superiority.
Right. And he argues that the substance, the reality, is found in the Messiah. If the law is written on your heart, you understand the value of holiness, separation, and gratitude that are inherent in, say, the dietary laws.
But relying on the external form, the specific ancient food restriction, as the measure of your righteousness, over and above the spirit of justice and mercy.
That is legalism. The law is established, but its shadow forms are superseded by the reality, who is the Messiah, and the internalized principles, which is the Torah on the heart.
So to maintain this critical balance and avoid twisting Paul, we have to summarize the proper authority structure. It's laid out in the scriptures, and it serves as the ultimate guide for discernment.
It's a hierarchy, really, where later teaching must always align with the foundation and the ultimate expression of that foundation. We can identify 3 layers of authority based on the source material.
First, there's a foundation. Moses, the prophets, and the writings. This is the bedrock of instruction and promise.
It's the original contract, the Beret.
Second, the fulfillment. Imnuia. His words and his actions are the ultimate perfect interpretation and demonstration of that covenant.
He is the standard, the prophet promised by Moses, and the goal, the telos of the Torah.
And third, you have the authorized witnesses, the 12, James, Jude, Paul, and the other workers and later teachers.
And these figures transmit and explain the meaning of the fulfillment.
So the critical discernment principle here is understanding the role of the New Testament letters, including Paul's.
They are powerful, inspired testimony and application, but they are not the covenant law itself. They are secondary to the clear, foundational words of Moses and the explicit, fulfilling teachings of Imnuia.
So if the teaching of a witness, when you isolate it, appears to contradict the clear teaching of the fulfillment Imnuia, or the foundation Moses, then our interpretation of the witness has to be wrong.
We have to assume our reading is flawed, as per Peter's warning. The later writings must be weighed and tested against the earlier established authority.
This isn't about diminishing Paul.
Not at all. It's about reading him responsibly within the complete scriptural narrative. We honor his testimony, but we never place his explanatory letters above the covenant foundation and the Messiah who fulfilled it.
It's a disciplined approach that ensures continuity, protects the integrity of the single covenant story, and keeps us from building conflicting doctrines.
It provides the guardrails necessary to navigate passages that are admittedly difficult to understand. It ensures we never twist them into contradicting the simple truth that Imnuia himself said, he came not to abolish, but to fulfill.
So this deep dive has traveled all the way from the Hebrew word adash to the Greek telos. And what we found is a singular, continuous narrative.
It really is. When we stop reading the sources as disconnected texts and we allow the prophets and the Messiah to define their own terms, the debate just kind of dissolves.
The core truth seems undeniable. The renewed covenant is not a new law, it's not a replacement people, it's not a different foundation.
It is the same covenant cut with Moses, anticipated by Jeremiah, fulfilled by Imnuia's sacrifice, and internalized in the hearts of those who follow him.
The Torah is not abolished. It is written on the heart.
Authority is not replaced. It is perfected and fulfilled.
And Jeremiah is not contradicted. He is lived out by the power of the Spirit.
It is one covenant flowing through one story, resulting in renewed hearts and living instruction.
This realization transforms how we approach righteousness today. If the law has been relocated from external stone to internal character, the bar for obedience is, paradoxically, both higher and more intimate.
And this leaves us with a provocative thought to consider, one based directly on this shift from external form to internal value.
Okay.
If the true measure of the renewed covenant is the internalization of the law, the living out of justice, mercy, and faithfulness, how do we, in our modern context, practically distinguish between merely obeying ancient cultural forms and genuinely living the weightier matters of the Torah.
How do you ensure your obedience is driven by the internal character of justice and mercy, rather than slipping back into external compliance and focusing on forms that may no longer apply to your time and culture? That is the perpetual challenge of the heart-based covenant.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the nature of the covenant. We hope this exploration strengthens your understanding of the foundational source material.
Until next time, keep seeking the depth in the sources.